Welcome to Shad's Guitar Show. Whether it's the gear or the players who made the gear famous, join me each episode as we discuss all things guitar. Well, hey there, and welcome into another exciting episode of Shad's Guitar Show. This one, I believe, is coming out the day after Easter, so let me say that I hope you had a wonderful Easter Sunday with family and friends. And today we're going to dive into some more Gretsch related stuff, which are probably like wah wah, because I know I've been doing a lot of Gretsch and Gretsch artist related stuff lately, but this one's kind of cool. And it is just sort of the story of how Gretsch battled back from almost not being a brand anymore. And we're going to talk about that. And I've entitled this episode, Saved from the Baldwin Era, Gretsch Reborn. Like Fender with its contentious CBS era and Gibson with the troubled Norlin years, Gretsch also found itself in the rough seas of acquisition. Acquisition by the Baldwin Company, to be exact. Like CBS and Norlin, Baldwin didn't seem to understand the legacy they had acquired. Radical cost-cutting measures that led to suspect quality, and many models going in a direction in pretty much direct conflict with what players actually wanted. Making them cheaper and faster seemed to be the mantra of the 70s. And decades later, we have the benefit of hindsight, and we may wonder how these legacy brands could have slipped so far. Our story in this episode is how Gretsch fought its way back from basically being non-existent for a time to restoring its reputation and connecting with a new generation of players. So let's discuss how Gretsch saved itself from the Baldwin years and found its way back to greatness. So let's start by setting the stage for what happened. When exploring the Gretsch world, you'll run across mentions of the Baldwin era or the Baldwin years. So what does that term refer to? Generally speaking, people use it to refer to Gretsch in the 1970s. But more specifically, it refers to the period when the Baldwin Piano Company owned Gretsch, which was substantially longer, from the summer of 1967 to early 1985. The term is often used in an unflattering light to denote generally neglectful Baldwin rule that resulted in a decline in quality, unpopular new instruments, corporate upheaval, a dwindling sales report that ultimately led to Gretsch ceasing production altogether in 1981. Gretsch had been a family-run company ever since Friedrich Gretsch founded it in New York in 1883. But in the mid-1960s, then-President Fred Gretsch Jr. purportedly found himself with no heir interested in running the company and decided to sell. Baldwin, riding high at the time and spurred by its 1965 acquisition of UK guitar maker Burns, sought to acquire an established U.S. guitar maker, and having lost out to Fender to CBS, duly turned its attention to Gretsch. The sale was completed on July 31st of 1967. Long successful in building and marketing pianos and organs, Baldwin seemed to assume that its existing production and marketing methods would work equally well for guitars. They didn't. The company quickly introduced sweeping design changes, and in 1970 moved production from Gretsch's original home in Brooklyn, 1,000 miles away, to existing Baldwin facilities in Boonville, Arkansas. Little, if any, of this endeared Baldwin to Gretsch staffers, and very few made the move southwest in September of 1970. As if all that wasn't bad enough, not one but two major factory fires in Boonville in 1973 dealt painful blows to production. Wider development in popular music didn't exactly help either. Big hollow body guitars had largely fallen from favor in rock music by the early 1970s, as less delicate solid body guitars that produced greater sustain and didn't feed back ruled the day. Gretsch's most popular guitars, darlings of original rock and roll and the British invasion only a decade earlier, seemed to vanish from the concert stage and the charts throughout the 70s. A few stalwarts hung on, but there was no mistaking a definite decline. For these and other reasons, Baldwin never achieved great success with Gretsch guitars throughout the 70s. As for the Baldwin era, it ended quietly and not all that tidily. By the early 1980s, Gretsch guitars under Baldwin rule had yet to become profitable, and premier endorser Chet Atkins left the fold for Gibson when his contract expired. Baldwin ceased Gretsch guitar production altogether by 1981, and parent company Baldwin United declared bankruptcy in late 1983. Well, that's when the Gretsch family re-enters the picture. Fred Gretsch Jr., who'd sold the company in 1967, had passed away in 1980. His nephew, Fred Gretsch III, had followed Baldwin's bankruptcy proceedings. He reacquired Gretsch in January of 1985, and with that, the Baldwin era was truly over. As it had been for its first 84 years, Gretsch was once again a family-run company. While all this was going on, wider developments in popular music were once again conspiring to affect the future of Gretsch, this time for the better. In the early and mid-1980s, a new generation of players was discovering Gretsch guitars, especially in the UK, as a raucous rockabilly revival was starting to make pretty big waves on both sides of the Atlantic. The stage was set for a new Gretsch era. A new golden age was about to dawn. And although Fred technically bought back the company, it's more accurate to say that he bought back the Gretsch name because with no factory or inventory at his disposal, he was basically starting from scratch. But a new beginning came from the collaboration of Gretsch and George Harrison to produce a unique Traveling Wilburys collector guitar. These are now highly collectible pieces that are sought after by Gretsch collectors worldwide. The simple electronics and short scale of the TW100 Traveling Wilburys guitar was highly uncharacteristic for Gretsch, but this unique model helped to get the company back on track in the late 80s. With the capital gain from the success of the Wilbury guitar, Gretsch was able to begin large-scale production again. New production was based in Japan, allowing the company to churn out affordable guitars with the look and feel of its golden-era instruments. It's worth remembering that in the 80s, there was relatively little interest in Gretsch guitars, much beyond those on a quest to complete their set of Beatle-related collectibles. Dealers sold the occasional old Falcon or 6120 for decent money, but most other Gretsches went for very little. There was Poison Ivy and the Cramps with her 50s 6120, and Brian Setzer of the Stray Cats heading up a rockabilly revival with another vintage 6120, but there wasn't too much more visible action for the brand. Fred Gretsch Enterprises Limited announced its first line of proper new Gretsch guitars in the second half of 1989. The company was unable to use the name Chet Atkins on the associated models because Chet had defected to Gibson in 1980, so some of the model names had to be modified. Gretsch listed 5 hollow bodies in the first lineup: the Tennessee Rose, a revised name for the Chet Tennessean; the Nashville, a plain 6120 using its post-66 model name; Nashville Western, a 6120 with a G brand; Country Classic 1, the revised name for the Chet Country Gentleman single cut; and the Country Classic 2, a Gent double cut, along with 4 solid bodies: the Duo Jet, the Silver Jet, the Jet Firebird, and the Roundup. And later in '89, the catalog would add a few White Falcons to the list. This was a good start for the revived Gretsch brand, and more reissues would appear in the coming years as the firm got into its stride, including anniversary models, country clubs, and a White Penguin, as well as other signature models. New twists appeared too, such as Falcons finished in black or with silver-colored metalwork, scaled-down versions of various models, and several different colors of sparkle-finished jets. Gretsch first began to consider more accurate recreations of old designs in 1992, when it attempted a vintage-style 6120, calling it the Nashville 6120 1960. It was a commendable effort, with thumbnail markers, 0 fret, 3 knobs and 2 selectors, and a body depth of 2.5 inches. But details relating to the Bigsby and the bridge seemed a bit off. Further bids for vintage veracity came with oldie-style takes on the Country Classic, Country Club, Duojet, Falcon, Nashville 6120, Silverjet, and Tennessee Rose. It was Gretsch's alliance with Fender, starting officially on the first day of 2003, that seemed at last to make the most of what Gretsch had to offer. Fred was keen to explain that this was not a takeover. We still own and control the brand. Fender does the marketing, manufacturing, and distribution. Fender made a complete overhaul of the line, overseen by Mike Lewis, who had worked at Fender since the early 90s, and now became Gretsch's marketing manager. Mike changed virtually every specification of every model, and in 2007 he supervised the return of the Chet Atkins name to Gretsch, which allowed the reintroduction of the original model names, with the exception of the Tennessean, as Gibson still owned the trademark on that one. Since its rebirth 30 years ago, the Gretsch line has flourished, and today there are dozens of model variations to choose from. And the core models survive, not only in broad feature styles, but also in ever more accurate vintage select editions. There are some interesting newer model families, such as the center blocks, while the custom shop established at Fender's U.S. factory in 2004 caters to those looking for the master-built experience. Brian Setzer, who officially became an endorser of Gretsch guitars in 2003, has done much to bolster the newfound interest in Gretsch guitars over the last couple of decades. And if you haven't heard my episode on 3 reasons why Brian Setzer rules, you're definitely going to want to check that one out. Brian has a slew of signature models to his credit over the years, including many recreations of his 1959/60 6120, as well as hot rod models. But the current day Brian Setzer Smoke model comes closest in most of the vintage accurate aspects that players are looking for. Plus, there are a bunch of other great signature models that draw from the past, such as the Duane Eddy and Eddie Cochran models, which reprise those original early 50s 6120 models, and the Reverend Horton Heat model, which is James Heath's tribute to the early Gretsch 6120s with some of his own tweaks. There's the Billy Duffy, Stephen Stills, Chris Chaney, and Richard Fortis Falcons. And Gretsch has delved into the worship world with models for Hillsong artists Michael Guy Chislett and Nigel Hindroff, and Latin Christian artist Chris Rocha. And the signature list of artists continues to grow as younger players get hip to that great Gretsch sound. Like with other legacy brands, vintage Gretsch fans will argue that the old Gretsch guitars still offer a sonic and aesthetic charm all its own. But for many players, the brand and its new guitars have never seemed in better shape. As for my take on all of this, I believe that Gretsch will always be a household name in the guitar community that is enjoyed by a small but loyal group of players. They will never sell in numbers like the Strat, the Telecaster, or the Les Paul, but the brand will live on because it occupies an aesthetic and sonic territory completely unique that nothing else quite does. In that way, it's got an almost boutique feel, even at its considerable size. And maybe that's why the brand resonates so much with me. I like guitars that have a more niche following. Come to think of it, the same holds true for most of the music I like. If you've enjoyed this exploration of the rebirth of Gretsch guitars, please share it with a guitar-loving friend. Also, please leave a rating wherever you're listening. That helps the show tremendously. Subscribe to Shad's Guitar Show on YouTube and follow me on Instagram. I genuinely appreciate the support. And if you'll keep listening, I'll keep the conversations going as we discuss all things guitar.